Hello and welcome to another Leica review. Today I will be talking about the new Leica M11. Now, as you may know, there has not been many rumors about the upcoming M11. And of course, the Leica likes to keep these things as secretive as possible before the announcement date. What I am expecting is, given the time frame and timeline of these new introduction of Leica M cameras, I think it is due to come out very soon. That will probably be somewhere in October, sometime before the new year, that we would hear about it. And the reason for that is because there is much to be gained from the fact that a new upgrade would make the camera more marketable, something that will be more interesting. Now, I will be explaining that in a bit, but first, let's look at what is going on in the market right now. As you know, Leica has introduced the L mount or the SL mount series of lens mounts, which has become the standard for another company, which is Panasonic with their S1. So what we are seeing is this new generation of lenses that are available from other manufacturers when it used to be only from Leica. What that means is that you are going to be able to use this lens in different formats. And that means you can go from using it on, for example, the Leica SL and then put it onto a Panasonic. Alternatively, you will be able to put, for example, a Panasonic lens on a Leica body. So what we're seeing is this consolidation of putting all the mounts into one, which means that you're going to be seeing L mount pretty much all throughout the Leica's lineup. Now, what remains to be seen, though, is whether M mount will be abandoned for the L mount. What that means is, would there be an adapter and saying, all from now we will have lenses made in the L mount instead of the M mount, which would be a drastic step for Leica, but it will be a one that will be worthwhile for future investments. Besides that, we are also seeing a change in the company philosophy, which is they're opening up for other lens manufacturers to produce lenses for their lineup. One that I particularly have an eye on is Sigma, which has probably the best lineup out of all when you compare the price to quality ratio in terms of more affordable lenses. Of course, there is no denying of the fact that Leica lenses are extremely expensive, and there are reasons for that. One mainly being the high profit margin, but also the fact that it comes with the fact that it's being produced mostly in Germany. Now, thinking about the M mount is going to be something that is probably a nostalgic, a classic thing. It's like buying a vintage car, a vintage idea, but in a concept that is always changing. Now, if you look at the way the new Sonys are coming out, you're seeing that they have the eye tracking, they have incredible video capabilities, they have very high megapixels, and you're seeing that to be the path that a lot of other manufacturers will be taking. So before it was 24 megapixels, all of a sudden it jumped to 40s, and now we have 61 megapixels. And on that bandwagon, Leica did not fall behind. If you remember the Leica Q, going into Leica Q2, there was a drastic change in the number of megapixels. And that made the camera more marketable. But when you compare it to, for example, the Sony's RX1R Mark II, that is several years behind in terms of the announcement or release. Sony, of course, has kept the forefront on introducing new lineups and thus gained a huge market share. Now, that brings me to the question of what will be the megapixels on the new Leica M11, which I'm suspecting to be a 48 megapixels. And the reason for that huge jump will probably be that they will probably be using the similar or the same sensor as they use in the Leica Q2. So that gives you a hint about what direction Leica will be taking. Now, also another thing that you may be noticing is that a lot of these cameras that are coming out from different manufacturers are highly competitive, and they provide incredible advantages in low light circumstances because they have optical or in-body stabilizations. What that means is that you could shoot in almost near darkness and have a 4 or 5 stop gain, where you could lower your shutter speed to an extent where you're able to capture images and not be worried about creating noise in your images. Of course, there's also the fact that the technology for noise reduction has come an incredible way, providing the foreground for things to come. Of course, Leica has purposefully done certain things to ensure that the camera sits in a special niche for the Leica M series so that it does not have competition. If, for example, Leica was to compete on the video capabilities, which it doesn't offer in the Leica M11 or M10, we will have competition in terms of whether it's going to be 4K, 6K, is it going to have autofocus, is it going to have this and that. Those are not going to be options there. So what Leica will say to you is purely simply, you're going to shoot photography only, and you're going to do it at a very high price. But that is debatable whether it is a good price or a bad price, or is it a high investment or a bad investment. Those I have discussed many times in my other reviews. What is important here is whether this camera is built for the new age. Will it have in-body stabilization? Because lenses do not come with stabilization. So is it going to be just a higher megapixel camera? That is the question that will be answered when the release date comes. You will also notice that there were changes made. You will notice that the buffer on the M10 is incredibly slow and incredibly, useless, in a better word, when it comes to doing high-speed photography. You cannot do more than 5 shots, when in other cameras you could do 10, 12, even 14 frames on a full frame. So what does that mean? It means that Leica is pushing you in one direction, saying, we're not going to compete with the other cameras. We're just going to say, we're slow, 5 frames. And then the buffer fills up, and that's another issue. So the buffer fill up will be probably improved to the extent that it doesn't go, slowing and shutting down when you got 10 frames. And that is going to be something that will be considered. I'm not expecting a huge jump in number of frames. It will probably be staying around 5, but the megapixels will be going up. And the layout, I think, will be unchanged. I think the worst thing that has ever happened to Leica M camera is the fact that they have put that continuous shooting mode into the menu, which is inaccessible unless you go searching and diving, going through all the layers to find that thing to switch it back to continuous. And if you want to go back to single shots, well, you have to do that. So what it's basically like saying is, you are going to shoot the way I want you to shoot. I'm not going to put it on the button on the top where you can just click it back on and off and do photography. And what I do hate is that decisive moment story. You are not going to get that one shot. You may need several shots to get that right shot. That means that, for example, if you have somebody riding with a bicycle or there is movement, you may not be able to get it in the first shot, but you may be able to get it in the second or third shot. Now, in that decisive moment that happens, especially in a journalistic sense, well, that is something that you have to understand can be done very quickly if you had an older camera, which is just switching the flicking of a button or a dial. But in here, you're not going to have that choice. And I don't know if everybody wants to keep it on a single shot setting, unless you're doing portraiture in a enclosed environment where you have control of lighting and other variables. And it could also be the fact that you will be doing photography thinking that it is enough to do things like they did 30 years ago or 40 years ago, where a single shot will be sufficient and that out of focus or grain will be acceptable. But I will tell you this. Today, the technology required demands a higher quality. It's keeping up with times. As technology advances, things like computers, cars, and everything else advances. And cameras are no different. Although Leica has made strides in other camera departments, like the SL and the S, are still lagging behind in a lot of respects. And Leica M being one of those that still has a horrible buffer and has difficulties with noise at higher ISOs, when you can significantly see differences in the ISO performance of other cameras that have recently come out, even though they support higher megapixels. And now there is going to be whole talk about why we don't need higher megapixels. Frankly, you do need higher megapixels. What does higher megapixels do? Well, you can take an image and you have more detail, more refined detail. Whether you look at it on a small screen or a large screen, you will find that there is a elusive quality that comes with having higher megapixels. It defines the sharpness of the image, the details, the micro contrast. Those are things that I look for when I look at an image. That's why I use, for example, a medium format, because medium format affords me certain things. And I like medium format because it gives me the ability to have a shallower depth of field and other variables that will impact the way a photograph turns out. But on the Leica M11, we're going to have that megapixels jump up, and we're going to say, well, is this enough? Is this what we want? And that's a question that I think will be best answered by the user. Some people are just very content with low-grade images or having noise in their images. I've seen one photographer who has an M9 just shooting at 3200 ISO with incredible noise and grain, thinking that it's an artistic expression, when it is actually more like garbage, because that image requires quality, and quality is, well, not there when you do that. So you have to understand and respect what the capabilities of camera is and the limitations. And surely, like series have had limitations ever since they went digital from M8 to the current line. And I expect that there will be certain challenges. Now, some of you might be asking, are you going to sell your Leica lenses and go buy another lens? Well, I won't, because there is a sense of thing that I like when I have to dial in manually, and it's a conversation piece, and I feel there is interaction between choosing how I frame it and how I shoot it, and understanding that limitations will be there, and that means I probably have to shoot a higher frame rate, and it's going to mean that I have no in-body stabilization or eye tracking or focus that is going to aid me in capturing it faster. But what I will know is that for certain applications, it could be very useful. It could mean that I have a certain look, which I consider the Leica look. The Leica look is a thing that I've discussed in the past. It's the choice of colors, the way the rendering of the images, the way that certain things look in the camera. And when it's printed, it looks wonderful. You'll see less of it when you're looking at images on a screen, because screen is, low resolution. Most screens do not go over HD quality. And if you're not looking at 4K or 6K monitors, or you have what we call a correction monitor or a color monitor that is designed for color correction, you're not going to catch all those details. And that's understandable, but the world is not Instagram with tiny pictures. The world is more than that. More is what you will find when you use a camera for the rightful purpose. And I don't expect Leica M to be going out there and doing sports action or that kind of photography, but it would be a very good camera to use in the journalistic sense, taking it out on the streets and doing some photography, or going into an area where photographs could be invaluable, more so than having a very fast camera. For example, the Hong Kong uprising that is happening. You could be there and capture photographs, or you could be in Venezuela when protests are happening and you could capture that. You could be in a war zone and be able to get images as the old generation have done. And it is incredibly reliable. Yes, you will not have weatherproofing and all those other aspects, but it's mechanical. It does not fail as easily as far as the lenses are concerned. As far as using it for showing off or saying I own a Leica, here's the question I ask. How many shots have you fired in the last year? How many shots? How many photographs have you taken? And how long did your camera sit on the shelf? That is the question that is important. How much of a photographer you are. And that is what I would like to leave you with. Thoughts, concerns, and Leica M11 to come.